Okay, so this is part 3 of the Yokomo 93 Works special project. As you can see here, I have a fair amount of the front suspension complete. It already took me several hours just to get to this point. Most of that had to do with just preparing the front arms for mounting. So I had gone over this in my 91 Works build series. And for this guy right here, this may look familiar to some of you users or subscribers to my channel. And there are some slight differences to how you would prepare these front white nylon arms for the 93 Works compared to something like the 91 Works or the 92 Works. And I'll explain why. So let's see, how do I want to do this? I'll start here. So most of the preparation is the same. Like on the hinge pin for the mounting on the inside is not quite long enough to clear the back end of the suspension arm, so you have to shave that down a little bit to make clearance so you can put the E-clip in the back there. So that's the same. For the outside, you have to do the same thing, right? The arm's a little bit longer or fatter than the length of the hinge pin, so I just shaved it from the back to make clearance for the E-clip on the rear. So those bits are the same. You have to round off the inside edges of the suspension arm so that they clear the bulkhead as the suspension arm sweeps up and down. So that's the same between the two Works models. What's different is the fact that you have this brace here on the steering rack, this cross member. And what happens is, if you look top down, the the leading edge surface of this cross member extrudes a little bit further forward than the leading edge of the actual steering rack itself, and it's maybe 1 or 2 millimeters or so. And at a certain part of the thrower, like right around here, this brace can actually hit the suspension arm. So you have to shave the rear of the suspension arm down a little bit just to create clearance, right? You can see this is not a single edge here. It kind of at this point going inwards, I shaved it down by, maybe a millimeter or two just to create clearance for the cross member on the steering rack, which is specific to the 93 Works, right? So if we go to the 91 Works, we don't have that cross member. It's just the front part of the steering rack. And as the suspension compresses, right, the arm itself comes kind of close to this front sort of leading edge here of the steering rack, but it doesn't touch. But if you have that cross member on there, then it can actually touch the arm. So that's something extra that you have to do to the front suspension arm. I had considered installing the Suzuki blue aluminum front caster blocks, and there is a way to do that to make it work with these arms. Basically, there's an extra bit, maybe if I just do it from the underside, there's an extra bit of material that you have to shave out on the rear side of the arm to allow those caster blocks to clear. Or maybe I should be more specific. If you have the 5-degree caster block, it should be okay without making that modification. With the 8-degree caster block, the caster block leans back a little bit more. So when you mount the block, it's going to grind, if you will, against the rear surface of this opening in the arm for the caster block. So if you want to do that, you have to just, kind of take a little black Sharpie and just kind of map out, where on the arm this rear portion sort of binds up against the arm. And you can see here there's this little divot that I dremeled out with a sanding bit in the event that I wanted to mount a blue, one of the blue aluminum caster blocks. But the thing with those aluminum caster blocks is that they don't have this ear piece on the rear to mount a ball stud for the torque rod assembly on the 93 Works. So, you could use them on the 94 or the 95 YZ10, or even say a 91 or a 92 Works with these arms. But, on the 93 specifically has this torque rod assembly, so you can't really use those caster blocks on the 93 Works if you want to preserve this torque rod assembly here, right? But on the 91 Works, I don't have them installed, the blue aluminum blocks, although I do have a set. But you can see here, right, this rear surface is perfectly flat. And on here, I kind of, grinded it back a little bit in case I wanted to mount them. So if you want to do it on the 91 Works with any of the aluminum caster blocks, it could be the Cross units or the Suzuki units, you may have to grind out a little, bit of material there in the rear. But I opted not to do that because I wanted to maintain the torque rod assembly that's so unique to the 93 Works. As you can see, also, there's a lot more blue aluminum stuff, right? There's the turnbuckles. These are Team Associated factory team turnbuckles, and you only need 2 different types of turnbuckles. So for the camber links and the steering links, the 1.65-inch 42mm turnbuckles are what you would need. And then for the torque rod and the front and rear bulkhead turnbuckle, if you will, for the inner hinge pins, those use the 1.33-inch turnbuckles. Okay, so you would need to get 2 pairs of these, right? 1 pair for the turnbuckles on the bulkheads, and then another pair for the left and right torque rods, and then 3 pairs of these guys, the 42mm titanium ones, front and rear camber links, and the front steering links. So I don't have the steering links mounted yet because I don't have the steering block mounted yet. I'll get to that later. But anyway, it was quite a lot of preparation work for these arms. And I mentioned this before in the 91 Works build. Take your time with these. Don't just go in and Dremel everything right away. Make sure you hand fit it and just Dremel it bit by bit as you need to, because you don't want to end up removing excess material and end up regretting it later on, because these arms are quite expensive. Luckily for me, I actually bought 2 sets of these arms in case I made a mistake or wanted to go put these arms on another project. So I had a spare set of arms to play around with if I needed to. Let's see, what else is going on here? That's basically it. I had mentioned in, I think, my 93 Works, the first project video, that adjusting these torque rods does take a bit of care, because if they're too short or too long, it will cause binding in the suspension arm movement. So I can already tell that the left arm here, this is on the left side of the chassis, this actually compresses more than on the right side of the chassis because of the length of the torque rod. But I had to adjust it in such a way so that as the arm is compressing, it doesn't cause any bind. So for whatever reason, this doesn't compress quite as much, but even at full compression, that should be more than enough to fully compress the front shock. So I'm really not concerned about that. And the droop is about the same from left to right. So as you adjust the length of these, if you make it really short, for example, it's going to pull the arm up a bit, and that will reduce the front droop. But really, you don't necessarily want to adjust this to change the droop. You want to adjust this just to make sure that the arms move freely up and down, and then leave it there. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for the front there. I think what's next is I'll work on the rear suspension arms and the rear hub carriers, camber links. And then after I get to that, then I'll work on, the front steering links and, do the dog bones or the universals front and rear. So quite a bit more left to do. Eventually I have to get to the shocks. I have a nice set of Kashima shocks with all the J Concepts goodies that I'm going to mount for the shocks here. But we can see it starting to take shape. And, there are different shades of white, if you will, for this. Like the white nylon here is a different white than the fiberglass. Fiberglass is a bit more like almost like a yellow. And then these, ball cups are rather old. They're from the original kit. So they're a little aged, but they're white-ish, maybe a little off-white. The bulkhead caps, that's a different shade of white. But generally speaking, it's all a nice light color. And it goes nicely with the blue aluminum parts. So far, so good. And, of course, I'll have more videos soon. In the meantime, thanks for watching.